The game of Shiritori, also known as word chain, is as simple as it sounds. Two or more players alternate back and forth adding words to a chain by matching the last letter or character of the previous word with the first letter or character of the new word that they want to add to the chain. And a player loses by either repeating a word that's already been said, or by not being able to come up with a new word to add to the chain. And that's pretty much it. A game that would be excellent for learning new knowledge, finding out new words that your opponent may come up with, as well as flexing the knowledge that you already possess. Which is why this game was the perfect game that the Flugel have adapted for playing against other races. As the Flugel are a race that has spent the last 6,000 years after the Great War, since they can no longer wage war, they instead have gathered knowledge. And so they have adapted the game of Shiritori. But not just normal Shiritori. They have taken it to a whole new level, because they don't just like boasting their massive amount of knowledge, they also like boasting their egregious amount of power. So they created the game known as Materialization Word Chain. When you add a word to the chain, if it does not currently exist, well, it poofs into existence, and if it already does exist, then it disappears. This game runs on such a powerful spell that it essentially creates a little pocket universe for the game to operate in, where there is a copy of pretty much everything in the world, including the world itself, which is very relevant to the game that was played between Jibril and Blank, Sora and Shiro. This game is certainly one of my favorites in No Game No Life, not only because it introduces Jibril as another main character, but also in the way that the game unfolds, and by the fact that it was won from the very first move. It was a bit of a risk with the first move, but after that point, Sora and Shiro had it in the bag, showing the progression of the games that they have already played in this world and into the games that will come in the future, showing how they are becoming more and more in control with every game that is played. But this game also will have a few differences in how it turns out, depending on how you have experienced this game. Whether you have watched the anime or read the light novel, and quite possibly even depending on whether you've watched the anime subbed or dubbed, and whether you've read the original Japanese translation of the light novel or the English translation of the light novel, because this game deals directly with languages, and I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone who's taken, a secondary language class at some point throughout school. Languages seem to work a little bit differently here and there, so the overall words that are used throughout the course of the game will differ depending on the translation that you're reading. I've only ever experienced the English translation of the light novel as well as the anime, so if you have any other insight from the Japanese translation of the light novels, as well as understanding the Japanese language from the anime itself, and there's other things that I've missed, please let me know down in the comments below. But the overall events of the game and the way that it is won do stay the same variation to variation, save for one change that the anime made to the light novel. And in my opinion, it is a much better change. So before I get into that, let's go over the actual rules of Materialization Shiritori. The original rules of Shiritori do carry over. A player is eliminated if they repeat a word that's already been said, or cannot add a new word to the chain within 30 seconds. They cannot answer. But this is Materialization word chain, so there is one other way that your opponent can lose, and that is by dying. Because as long as you know the name of something that can kill your opponent, you can use that to your advantage. Though it is notable and clarified in the light novel that you cannot use words to directly influence your opponent. For example, in the game played between Jibril and Blank, Jibril could say the words heart or water, and well, the human body kind of relies on those two things to function. They are very necessary to continue your own existence. And so, if those words were said, the presence of those objects inside Sora and Shiro, the players specifically, would be unfazed. Though Steph, considering she's not a player but still in the vicinity of this game, if someone had said heart, her heart would disappear. So Steph was bullied all throughout this game, as is made very clear in the anime as well as the light novel. That stays very much consistent. But it is an important clarification to make that you cannot affect your opponent's body directly with the words that you say to such an effect that they wouldn't be able to continue their existence. During this game, Sora does say spirit columns or spirit circuits depending on the translation, and the spirit circuits within Jibril's body do disappear. That isn't something that she needs for her continued existence. It makes her uncomfortable, makes her unable to use magic, but he's still able to affect things that are inside her body so long as it doesn't affect her life force, essentially. Hopefully that all makes sense. And now, the last little series of rules that is crucial to the game being played is in regards to the words that can be said throughout the game. For everything that you say, you have to be able to conjure an image for, to be able to materialize it in the world. So if you say words that either don't exist, or of ideas or concepts that you can't conjure an image for to materialize it in the world, then you cannot use those words. Everything needs to have a material counterpart. And to that end, you can use words from other languages, as well as even slang for different words. So the intent behind the words that you say is very important for this game, as we will see later when I go through the events of the game itself. And you are free to use words that your opponent does not know. In fact, it's very much encouraged because the Flugel want to gain more knowledge of words that they don't already know, and add it to their own repertoire. And finally, the last little thing in regards to the words that can be said is in terms of the language used, whether it's Japanese or English, and which translation you're reading. Because in the Japanese language, at least from my interpretation, I have no experience with translating Japanese or anything like that, but from my interpretation of it, objects can often be referred to in a single phrase that is considered one word, especially in something like shiritori. And when translated to English, that object is then referred to by two words. And in the scope of this game that's being played, as long as you were referring to a single object or a single entity, you can use phrases that are two words. It doesn't have to be a single word, as does happen throughout the anime at multiple instances, as well as in the English translation of the light novel. But enough about the rules now. Let's get into the game itself. That begins with Sora's first move, and also technically could be considered as ending with this first move as well, because he says H-bomb, or again, depending on the translation, atomic bomb, which is two separate words. He summoned the most powerful force he could think of from his old world, and through this one act tested a couple of things. Now he knows he can use objects and words that Jibril is unfamiliar with, something that she had not previously clarified. And through Jibril's response to this act, he was able to easily discern her outlook on the game and all of humanity as a whole. She immediately uses the Eternal Fourth Protection spell created by the elves to guard Sora, Shiro, and Steph from the blast, but she takes it head on and is completely unfazed. Which of course she boasts that there's no way you can kill me, so you may as well give up and just try to entertain me as long as possible. But through this one act, Sora could easily discern how arrogant Jibril was, and that she really wanted to keep the game going due to her own self-interest. She thought there was absolutely no way that she would lose, so she has no reason to stop the game. She knows in her mind that she can end it at any given point in time because of how resilient she is to all types of external damage. And so the game continues from there, back and forth, getting to the beach, the removal of clothes, which, by the way, in the light novel, all clothes were removed, including Sora's, not just the women's clothes. So, you know, fan service was definitely added to the anime, which has happened at multiple points already. Anime's gonna be anime. But still, the game is quite interesting as it plays out. The game goes on for multiple hours, and Jibril, throughout this time, continually boasts about how superior she is and how inferior humanity is. And so, after a certain point in time, Sora starts getting angry at her, or at least feigning anger at her, saying that she thinks she's so high and mighty, and turns her own words on her, saying that it is the Flugel who are weak, beings only created for war, but they're not able to wage it, that they're ignorant, that they don't know anything about the world. They claim to seek out new knowledge, but are so focused on themselves that they can't see what is right in front of them. Things of that nature. And that really gets under Jibril's skin. And this anger and insult to Jibril happens in both the anime and the light novel. But this is where the one, in my opinion, major change happens. Sora, in the anime, writes down on a piece of paper the word egocentric. and shows it to Jabril. And in the anime, you can see it in her tone and the way she's depicted that she's insulted that Sora thinks she doesn't know what that word means. Which is important because that makes that word stick in her mind. And with that final box checked, Sora decides to go for the win. He starts disassembling the planet itself, starting with the mantle, and then the outer core, and then he and Shiro run up a couple steps of stairs and get just a little bit of elevation over Jabril and say the lithosphere, causing the outer crust of the planet to disappear, and all of them start plummeting to the center of the Earth. Something that likely would end up killing Jabril, but Sora and Shiro would die first due to the heat, because Jabril would be able to last getting a lot closer, and so she's still thinking that she's going to be the ultimate winner in her arrogance, thinking that this is all that Sora and Shiro have planned. But of course, Blank have planned even further ahead, saying oxygen gas, at least in the anime, and eighth element in the light novel translation. This little exchange being a perfect way to showcase the rules of the materialization Shiritori. Oxygen gas, of course, refers to oxygen gas, but if you say eighth element, that could also refer to oxygen. You could simply just say oxygen as well, eighth element of the periodic table. And you could probably go even further to say more about the chemical properties of oxygen itself to cause that element to disappear or reappear. There are multiple ways to refer to the exact same thing to work the world to your advantage. But in this case, Jabril has no knowledge of chemical theory, and so she ends up trying to bring back the oxygen, as she thinks that air just disappeared. So in the light novel she says aria, and in the anime she says still air. Both of these terms are phrases that can be used to describe the air that we breathe, but still air is 2 words, whereas aria is 1. Both of them still fall within the confines of the rules of materialization Shiritori, which can make things confusing, but also a lot more interesting given how many different variations there can be to refer to a single object or thing that may or may not exist. After this, though, Jabril has brought back the oxygen but gotten rid of everything else in the air, and pure oxygen is essentially a poison. Sora and Shiro follow this up by either saying real atmosphere or simply just atmosphere, depending on whether the previous term was aria or still air, what letter they were having to work with in the English language. And with the atmosphere now gone, that causes an immense amount of pain to Jabril, as it's now causing her lungs to essentially explode. And with the atmosphere gone, sound cannot travel, so she cannot speak. She has no spirit corridor, so she cannot use magic, but Jabril is still able to write in the air by converting the spirits in her own body to light, because her body is actually made up of spirits, and that's something that's not exactly conveyed clearly in the anime. Of course, though, the word that she writes is the one that Sora kind of implanted in her brain earlier, the word egocentric. At this, Jabril thinks she has won because now there's no way for Sora and Shiro to respond, but Sora pulls out that very same piece of paper and flips it to the other side, and the words Coulomb force are written. When Coulomb's force disappears, the nuclear force is overwhelming and it causes a hypernova, something that will kill all of them in an instant. But at the slightest fraction of a second, Jabril will die first, and thus, Blank is the winner of the game. They decided it from the very first move, by discerning Jabril's attitude toward the game, that she wanted the game to continue, and was thinking how superior she was, boasting about the Flugel's power, boasting about the Flugel's knowledge, and it was due to her own arrogance, her egotistic nature, that she lost. Now, in the light novel, Sora does not write down egotistic. He has Coulomb's force written down on a piece of paper, but the piece of paper itself is never brought out during the course of the game until Coulomb's force becomes relevant. Instead, he just goes to insult Jabril, and is anticipating that when it gets to the second to last move in the game, that she will say something where he can use Coulomb's force. And in the light novel, the word Jabril uses is erratic, which is said to be a substitution for incompetent or stupid, considering Sora was insulting the Flugel race. And Jabril thought of that in reference to Sora and Shiro, that they were being erratic, that they were being incompetent, stupid, idiotic, etc. And the light novel goes even further to say that Sora had accounted for 20 different possibilities that Jabril could have said. So instead of Coulomb's force, there were like 19 other words that he had written down on little pieces of paper in his pocket or something like that to be able to counter what Jibril said and end up with the same results. This I don't exactly buy into. I could understand that Sora would have 20 different possibilities, but the fact that he would have them all written on little pieces of paper in his pockets or things like that, I don't know, that just seems a little less likely and also more risky on Sora and Shiro's behalf, because Jibril could have chosen something other than those 20 possibilities. And it's stated in the light novel that, yeah, if she did choose something other than the 20 possibilities he accounted for, then they would have been screwed. So had she not fallen completely for the ruse in the light novel, then Sora and Shiro would have lost. Whereas in the anime, it's easily understandable why Jibril was fixated on the word egocentric, and thus allowed Sora to play Coulombe's force and win the game. And ultimately, Jibril's servitude as well. After this game, she found the new masters whom which she could serve, the ones aiming to take out God, the one that prevented the Flugel from carrying out the reason in which they were born, which is to wage war. So Jibril has found her new masters, and this game is a very fun one in the anime and the light novel. But let me know down in the comments what you guys think. What's your favorite part about Materialization Shiritori? Was this one of your favorite games in the anime? Was there a particular part you liked about it? And in particular, if you have read the Japanese translations or know the Japanese language, are there other intricacies with this game that I don't know or didn't point out in this video? I'd be really curious to find out. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you liked this video and want to see more like it, as a hint for future videos to come, Materialization Shiritori isn't the only game that's played against the Flugel in the course of this series, and even against Jibril in particular. So there's much more to look forward to. So make sure to stay tuned for that. And if you guys want to see some games played live, make sure to check out my Twitch channel as well, linked in the description below. I stream every Tuesday and Saturday. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Ashente.